Alphabet dies are a great craft room basic. You can customize your card with the recipient's name or age, or even make up your own sentiments. But wait, there's more. Today, I'm showing you a crazy way to use your alphabet dies. I'm using this bold alphabet and number set from scrapbook.com. I love an alphabet that has circular O's and single-story A's, but I have a number of others that are different, and we can talk about those possibilities too. This is as simple as looking at the shapes of the letters. I've pulled out both the O's, the lowercase l, the uppercase I, which are identical, and the lowercase I. I also grabbed the uppercase L. This gives me some circles and rectangles to work with, and the first thing I did was tape them together so that when I run them through my die cutting machine, it's more like using one die than 6 separate dies. Now, I was actually on a Zoom call with a friend while I was doing this, so I grabbed my little Blossom die cutting machine. It's manual, but it's quiet and it's very portable, so I was able to sit in front of my computer, chatting away with my friend while getting lots of this kind of tedious work done. At this point, I had an idea for the O's, but not so much for the others. So I cut as many O's as I needed, and I figured I would just work with however many L's and I's that I got from that. With the capital L, I had this idea that I could kind of build a pattern something like this, but you'll see in the end that that one will have to wait for another day, because I went a little crazy with the other letters. So here's what I got. What I hadn't counted on was all those dots from the centers of the O's and the dots from the I's, and that's where the L's took a back seat. Let me show you. I started by building the pattern with the small and large O shapes. If you don't have alphabet dies, you can probably create this with something else you do have. 2 circle dies taped together will create rings like this. Or if you do have alphabet dies where the O's aren't circular, this type of thing can still work with whatever shape you do have. Just try to see the shape rather than the letter. I checked to see that my pattern would cover a full card front, and then I divided the circles in order into 6 piles for coloring. I'm doing a 6-color rainbow. Well, it's a 12-color rainbow actually, but I'll get to that. This was the easiest way to keep track of how many of each size needed what color, especially while I was still chatting away with my friend and not really wanting to do too much math. To color them, you can use whatever medium you like to work with, but I wanted to ink blend onto them. I find it fast, and I'm very familiar with my Catherine Pooler colors and how they blend. And that's important because I put my lighter color all over each of the O's, and then I used a piece of acetate to mask off one half and blend a darker shade onto the exposed half. I love this look. It adds straight lines to the curves, it gives even more colors, and it also gives the look of some subtle dimension. But there's a more efficient way to do this, and it took me until green to figure it out. By lining them up in a row like this, I can put the mask down just once and blend the darker green on all 4 at the same time. And it works with a mix of sizes too. Again, I'm not being mathematical about where the center of each letter is, I'm just approximating it, so don't worry about being too precise here. Okay, these colors are really vibrant, but here's what's really going to take this over the edge. Put them on black. Right? I started with my center row because I knew that once I had them lined up properly, I could build the rest of the pattern out from there. The large O's touch each other, but the small ones don't. I also started with a panel that's bigger than a card front, and that takes the pressure off trying to get everything lined up precisely in the center because I can trim it down when I'm finished building it. And while I'm doing this, it's a great time to tell you that today's video is part of a video hop with some other crafters, and I've got more information and a link to the next video in the description below. Our theme is new beginnings, and I think that the idea behind it was supposed to be spring related, but I wanted to try and think outside that box. There's lots of new beginnings we celebrate, and I'm thinking this dramatic design is going to be perfect for the beginning of a new year. Actually, I think it would work for anything, and like any good, simple design, you can completely change the feel of this by changing up the colors. To finish this card, I added a simple Spellbinders New Year sentiment embossed in white on black cardstock, and a few gems for sparkle. That was a good one. I really like it. But now I've got all those dots left over from the centers, plus the dots from the eyes, and I want to do a card for another new beginning. How about a new baby card with some bubbles? I keep circle offcuts like this in a pocket to use in my card making, and I grabbed a few larger dots from that to give me more variety in my sizes, and I started with those largest ones to kind of figure out my process. I'm using cummerbund, cotton candy, and melon ice, which is a nice yellowy green that mixes well with the other two. I brought in each color on about half of the edge of the dot, Then I moved along by about a third and I started the next color. This gave me some nice overlaps to create another 6-color rainbow, but this one's much softer and more appropriate for a new baby. Again, I'm ink blending on my rotating platform with a grip mat. This makes it so quick and easy to turn the cardstock so I'm always blending in a comfortable position. I'm using finger daubers because I want my soft colors blended on the edges of the dots to leave a lighter area in the center. Once I did my test run and I figured out that I was happy with that process, I started loading up the grip mat with all of the dots of each size and blending them at the same time. You do want to be sure that you're not picking up too much of the ink from the grip mat. While any two of these colors mix nicely together to give another color, you get all three mixed together, it can look a little bit muddy. So by doing 9 at a time and putting the ink in the same place on each one, I was just trying to control that so I got fresh, pretty colors on my bubbles. The centers from the lowercase o's and the dots from the i's are pretty small, which made it harder to leave a highlight in the center, or even find room for all three colors, so I didn't worry too much about that. I grabbed this old tool to help me hold the dots down onto the grip mat too. This grip mat is due for a good soapy bath to restore its full stick, but in the meantime, this method worked well and kept the ink off my fingers as well. Next, I arranged the bubbles on my card front. You really want a random feel, so this is another way that this card is pretty much completely the opposite of the last one. White background, pastel colors, and random instead of a pattern. As I worked, I found that having some of them overlap looked really good too, so I did that in a few places, and I also tried to have a few going off the edge of the card. To glue them down, I used a jewel picker and liquid glue. This is a place where that press and seal trick could work if you have that, or some other temporary tape, so you can pick up all the dots at once, add glue, and then place it back down. But as I was working, I started thinking about how the bubbles looked better when they were closer together, so I started drawing them all down away from the top portion of the panel so I could make a square card and get more of the overlap. To finish this card, I spritzed the panel with shimmer spray, which softens the ink blending, and I splattered it with some silver watercolor. I added some white gel pen highlights to make the bubbles look shiny, and I stacked up an old Pretty Pink Posh baby sentiment. I finished with a few clear dewdrops to keep with the bubble theme. Now for all the L's and I's. As I said, the lowercase l is identical to the uppercase I, so I have twice as many of the long rectangles as I have of the short ones. I want to build kind of a random brick-like pattern, and since there's so many, I want to color them as quickly as possible. So I spent some time lining them up on my grip mat. I created 3 rows for 3 colors, but you could mix some of those eyes into the other rows so that you didn't get all of the short rectangles with the same color. I chose a mix of blues and greens from Catherine's Spa collection, but again, you could do the bold rainbow from the first card or the soft rainbow from the second to get a completely different look. I wanted the color on each of these rectangles to fade from dark to white, so that's why I lined them up like this. I started by blending the color full strength along the left side, and then I let it lighten up as I worked along. Obviously, I can't be too precise here, and you'll see that it doesn't matter if some have more white or more color. Again, you don't need alphabet dies for this. You might have little sentiment strip dies that you could use, and that's another use for these die cuts. These can absolutely work as little sentiment strips if you don't have sentiment strip dies. And here's another crazy way to use them. I created little swatches for my ink pads with the I from another alphabet set. Remember way back, I cut the number of O's I needed, and I just let the L's and I's fall where they may. So now I don't know how much of a pattern I'm going to be able to create. So I started with a square panel of cardstock, and I added lots of tape runner to this. This can be super light cardstock since it's just acting as a backer for the panel. Once again, you want to get that first row lined up pretty straight so that building the rest will be as easy as just lining them up. I tried to mix up the colors and lengths as well as the direction, so sometimes I put the colored end on the right and sometimes I put the white end on the right. Watching now, I'm not sure why I didn't have my grip mat out. Then I wouldn't have had to try to move the sticky panel around with my hands. But remember, I was still chatting with my friend, so I obviously wasn't paying too much attention. As I was building this, it was giving me kind of a woven feeling, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And I also realized that I might have been inspired subconsciously by the backsplash tile sample another friend had recently shown me. I kept going until I had used all my pieces, including the hangover bits that I just snipped off with my scissors. Now that's a pretty nice piece. You could die cut a shape from it, but I decided to leave it as it was. I added it to a navy panel that I embossed with the Simon Says Stamp Woven 3D embossing folder. I love how it seems to carry on the feel of the backsplash panel. I added the whole thing to a white card base, used a happy birthday sentiment from Concord and Ninth. Hey, a birthday's the beginning of a new age, right? And then I also added some blue gems for a little bit of sparkle. I guess this is really a lesson to look at the shapes of any of your dies without thinking about what their stated purpose is, to see what else you can make. Have you ever done something like this? Don't forget to use the link below to hop along to the next video for even more fresh beginnings inspiration. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.